Japan has just taken a bold and shocking step. It canceled a key security meeting with the United States that was scheduled for the 1st of July. This is not just a simple disagreement, it is a serious warning sign. A deep rift is beginning to form between two close allies. At the heart of the conflict is trust, and it is fading fast. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is under intense domestic pressure, especially with elections set for the 20th of July. His government is angry and feels humiliated. The Trump administration suddenly demanded that Japan increase its military spending and imposed massive tariffs, 25% on cars and 24% on other goods. Then, Trump went even further and canceled the 2018 trade deal that his own team had signed. For Tokyo, this felt like a betrayal. Now, Japanese officials see it as risky to appear in public alongside members of Trump's administration. They fear that being too close to Washington could cost them the election. And beyond that, voices in Japan are increasingly questioning whether America can still be trusted as a partner. If Japan begins to distance itself, it could put the entire US strategy in Asia at risk. Naturally, China and North Korea are watching the situation closely. Losing Japan could collapse the entire US defense architecture in the Pacific region. The alliance between Japan and the United States has been solid since the end of World War II, but today it is teetering on the edge. Trust has been damaged, and the consequences could affect global security. So let's break it down. For many years, Japan and the United States were reliable allies, especially in matters of security in the Asia-Pacific region. But something has gone seriously wrong. Prime Minister Ishiba, the leader of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, is now openly avoiding contact with Trump's team, even refusing joint photo opportunities. And in diplomacy, such gestures speak volumes. Japan clearly feels that it is being forced to accept terms it does not agree with. It all started with trade. Trump's administration canceled the 2018 agreement, leaving Japan in an awkward position. And with the July 20th elections approaching, the ruling party fears appearing weak in front of the United States and losing voter support. So the question arises, what do you do when friendship with an ally becomes a political liability? In Japan's case, you step back, at least for now. The breaking point came when Japan canceled an important meeting scheduled for July 1st. It was a 2+2 meeting, where the foreign and defense ministers of both countries usually gather to discuss military cooperation. These meetings are not mere formalities. They symbolize the strength of the US-Japan alliance, and Japan just canceled it. That was a loud and clear statement. The reason is not that Japan no longer values the alliance. The reason is that the government fears the consequences. With elections looming, being seen as too close to Trump's team could damage their approval ratings. The Japanese public is already upset over Trump's sudden trade and defense demands. What especially sparked outrage was a new requirement to increase military spending from 3 to 3.5% of gross domestic product. On paper, it might seem minor, but in practice, that's a massive amount of money. The demand came from a senior Pentagon official, Colby. In Tokyo, it was seen as pressure. There was no invitation to discuss, only an order. And making such demands just weeks before an election made it even more painful. Canceling the meeting was a bold move, a risky but deliberate gesture. Japan is willing to risk conflict with the United States to maintain its standing at home. But this also raises serious questions. If allies cannot even sit down at the negotiating table, what does the future hold for their alliance? In Japan, the opposition is growing louder in its criticism of the Trump administration. They are openly calling him and his circle criminals and extortionists, turning relations with the US into a central political issue. But this problem is not unique to Japan. Around the world, being friends with Trump has become a political liability. In Canada and Australia, conservative leaders who supported his approach have already lost elections. Japanese politicians fear the same thing could happen to them. That's why they are now doing everything possible to avoid appearing too close to Trump's team. But such distancing may come with consequences of its own. If Japan pulls too far away, it could destabilize the entire regional security framework. Who then will contain China, North Korea, or even Russia? Tokyo is fighting for political survival, but in doing so, it may be putting its own national security at risk. At the center of this storm is Colby, He holds the third most important position in the Pentagon and has long been a vocal critic of America's system of military alliances. He is not just a desk-bound bureaucrat, he is a loud and influential strategist who openly declares, "Many of America's military agreements can no longer be trusted." Colby already stirred controversy when he questioned the future of AUKUS, the ambitious trilateral alliance between the US, the UK, and Australia. Originally envisioned as a cornerstone of Indo-Pacific security, the pact is now under threat. According to Politico, the US is reviewing the agreement, not to improve coordination or adapt strategy, but to make sure it fits Trump's America First doctrine. Colby is reportedly challenging the core of the pact, the planned sale of 3 Virginia-class nuclear submarines to Australia. These submarines were meant to modernize Australia's navy and counter growing pressure from China. But now, Colby insists the US needs those submarines for itself. If the review leads to delays or cancellation, the entire AUKUS agreement could collapse. Worse still, it sets a dangerous precedent. America's commitments to its allies may hinge on who occupies the White House. For countries already uneasy about China's rise, such uncertainty could prove disastrous. US advantage in the Pacific rests not only on firepower, but on trust. If America cannot deliver a key submarine deal to one of its most loyal partners, what message does that send to Japan, South Korea, or even NATO? And now, Colby is demanding that Japan urgently increase its military spending. Japanese leaders were unprepared for this. For years, they have carefully balanced defense budgets in line with constitutional limits that restrict Japan's involvement in combat operations. The demand to raise defense spending to 3.5% of gross domestic product felt like a betrayal. No discussion, no dialogue, just a blunt directive. In Tokyo, this was seen as a clear sign that Japan's voice no longer matters. They feel they are being treated like a junior partner, expected to obey without question. If Colby is pressuring Japan, and Australia is already voicing concern over his approach, something larger may be unraveling before our eyes. The entire US defense structure in the Pacific could begin to fracture. Now let's return to that canceled meeting on July 1st. The 2+2 format is more than symbolic. These meetings align vital military plans, joint exercises, missile defense coordination, emergency response scenarios. Canceling it is not just poor diplomacy, it may weaken real operational readiness. The US and Japan rely on each other in a crisis. But now, without that high-level engagement, a North Korean missile launch or a maritime standoff with Chinese vessels could lead to confusion or delayed responses. Without regular coordination, such crises become harder to manage. The cancellation has not gone unnoticed outside Japan. In Beijing, Pyongyang, and Moscow, it may be seen as a weakening of the alliance, an opening for more aggressive moves. Even in Seoul and Canberra, there is a growing sense that Washington is overstepping and ignoring allied concerns. Japan is taking a serious gamble, canceling meetings, distancing itself from the US, and betting that voters will reward its firm stance against Trump. But if that bet goes wrong, Japan could find itself alone in a very dangerous region. This points to a very dangerous trend. US allies are no longer cooperating based on trust. They are trying to outmaneuver Washington. The alliance is no longer a partnership, but a political performance, and that could undermine America's influence across the globe. So what happens next? The first critical moment will be Japan's election on July 20th. If the ruling party loses, a new leader may take office, one who could seek to distance the country from the United States or even pursue new agreements with China or South Korea. The second risk is a real military crisis. If North Korea launches a missile or China stages a maritime provocation, the United States and Japan might be caught unprepared. The breakdown in communication following the canceled meeting could have very real consequences. The third threat is global. China is watching closely. If Beijing concludes that the United States is losing control over its allies, it may decide to go all in, testing boundaries around Taiwan or the disputed islands near Japan. And if Tokyo no longer feels secure in US backing, it might not have the confidence to respond. Still, the alliance can be saved, but only if both sides change course. Japan wants to be treated with respect. It does not want to follow orders. The United States, on the other hand, wants Japan to take a more active role in regional defense, especially in countering China. To repair relations, Washington should scale back its harsh demands and offer real incentives, such as access to military technologies or expanded joint exercises. And after the election, Japan should return to the negotiating table, ready for dialogue. But if the ruling party loses and a new government takes power, the future becomes impossible to predict. Meanwhile, China is wasting no time. After Trump imposed harsh tariffs on Japan in 2025, Beijing quickly moved to fill the vacuum. As US-Japan relations deteriorate, China is actively reaching out to Tokyo with offers of deeper trade ties, investment, and regional cooperation. In April and May, Chinese officials held closed-door talks with trade delegations from Japan and South Korea. Things are moving fast. According to media reports, several Japanese companies, especially in electronics and manufacturing, have already begun exploring Chinese alternatives to American suppliers and export routes. Beijing is offering what Washington no longer can: lower tariffs, long-term infrastructure investments, and even partial access to China's domestic market for Japanese automakers. China has gone even further, proposing potential maritime coordination. A year ago, that would have sounded like fiction, but now, joint port infrastructure projects in Southeast Asia are on the table. The motivation is clear. China sees an opportunity to weaken the US-Japan alliance by building economic dependency, and Japan, tired of trade aggression and diplomatic unpredictability from Washington, is more ready than ever to seek an alternative to one-sided dependence on the United States. But of course, this doesn't mean Tokyo is switching sides to Beijing. It's clearly hedging its bets. If America continues to push away its allies with tariffs and chaotic foreign policy, China won't have to fight for influence. It will simply inherit it. To stay informed as old alliances crumble and new powers emerge, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and we'll see you in the next video.